Good morning, Psych students. Hope it's been a good week. Today we're going to talk about the FRQ that you were assigned on Tuesday and just do some review concepts, make sure we're all on the same page with some of these terms. So this is AP Psych FRQ Review FRQ number 7. A psychologist conducted a study at her home during an annual activity of children wearing masks and going door to door receiving candy. This was an FRQ, I think, a couple years ago. The actual one they had on the test, I remember a lot of kids afterward kind of making fun of the fact that they could have just said trick-or-treating. Some of the children arrived alone while others arrived in a group. Over the course of the night, the psychologist asked half of the children to remove their masks when they arrived at the door. The remaining half kept their masks on. The psychologist told every child to take only one piece of candy. She then went inside the house, leaving the bowl of candy outside. This gave children the opportunity to take additional candy. The psychologist measured the percentage of children who took additional candy. Her hypothesis were that children would take more candy when they were alone and would take more candy when they were masked. And so this is one of those questions, and you might see this in the research question on the AP test, where you have to interpret data. There might be a graph, there might be a table. Okay, so, as it says, number of children who took additional candy, 21, you can look at the question yourself. We'll come back to that. So, number of children wearing a mask and solo, 21.4% took an extra piece of candy. When they were solo with no mask, 7.5%. When they were a group wearing a mask, 57.2%. With a group no mask, 20.8%. So once you go through the data, then you actually have to answer the question. Once again, operational definition comes. That was one of the ones we dealt with last week. So remember, operational definition is how are we measuring it? How are we defining the dependent variable? Okay, so I think the example I use, if heat causes aggression, well, okay, aggression is the dependent variable, but how are we going to measure it? That's the idea of an operational definition. If I'm going to say, all right, I turn the temperature up and I think people are going to act more aggressively, how am I going to measure aggression? Well, how many times people punch each other? That's my operational definition. In this case, the operational definition would be taking extra food. What percentage of kids took extra pieces of candy, depending on the situation. Explain how the data support or do not support each of those psychologists' hypotheses. Now, this is one of the things, there definitely was some confusion how to answer this question this week when you guys were doing it. And it does support one conclusion. Okay, well, remember, one of her hypotheses is that they will take more when they're masked. Well, that's true. Okay, 21.4%, you can refer directly to the data. More kids, like 14% more took the candy when they were masked when they were solo, and 37% more took it when they were a group and they wore a mask. So yeah, they took more, and there's no definition here. You look at the data. More kids took candy when they were masked. However, it doesn't support the fact that, or it doesn't support the idea that they took more when they were alone. When they were solo, only 7.5% took. And when they were, even with wearing a mask, they still took less than when they were in a group wearing a mask. So like that, question like that, you refer directly to the data, and that's your answer. Why can the psychologist not generalize her findings to all children? She didn't take a random sample. So remember, let's go through that. Random sample or sampling, where we're talking about, we're talking about taking people from a general population, and everybody in the population has the opportunity to be involved in the experiment. She didn't do that. This is just her neighborhood. And we don't know what kind of neighborhood she lives in. These kids could be representative of the general population, or they couldn't. We don't know that. It's not a very tight experiment. Okay, a random sample would be like if I picked one person to be in my study with every letter of the alphabet in their first name. Okay, so 5 people with A whose names start with A, 5 people whose names start with B, 5 people whose names start with C, all the way down. Yeah, and that would be random. Okay, and I could generalize then. So you can't generalize unless there's a random sample of the population. So be prepared for questions like that on the research method question. Calling into question, is this a good experiment or not? Things like that. Why is this not a naturalistic observation? part D, it's not a naturalistic observation because she interfered. A naturalistic observation would be simply throwing it out there and watching kids trick or treat, okay, without interfering at all. She actually told the kids, some kids to wear masks, some kids not to wear masks. So she manipulated the variables. In this case, she created an independent variable, wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. Okay, so it's not a naturalistic observation. Explain how each of the following might have played a role in children's behavior. Modeling. Okay, modeling, think social learning theory. Think of the Bandura experiment. I'm going to punch the bubble doll, and then I'm going to watch what kids do after they see me punch a bubble doll. So maybe kids saw other kids, either solo or in a group, taking extra pieces of candy, so they thought, hey, me too. Or maybe they saw people passing up and being respectful and only taking one piece of candy. So maybe they saw that and modeled their behavior that way. De-individuation, probably not likely to show up on the AP test simply because social psych terms for the most part are going to be ignored. Not one of the units that the AP test is requiring this year. Still good to know. De-individuation, loss of self-awareness in groups. The idea they took more in a group because they thought they could get away with it because they felt relatively anonymous. Added that the fact that they were wearing a mask. Part of de-individuation is you feel anonymous. Well, nothing more anonymous than wearing a mask and people can't see who you really are. Maybe that makes you more likely to take candy. And then Lawrence Culber's pre-conventional stage. Now, this another one, a couple questions came up on this during the week. Our pre-conventional stage is all about consequences, good or bad consequences. Okay, so if we review really quick, post-conventional is you're following your own moral code. Conventional, you're kind of doing what society wants. You want to be a good boy or you want to be a good girl. You want to do the conventional right thing or the normal right thing. With pre-conventional in this case, it could be acting in your own self-interest. I'm going to take more candy because, hey, it's a reward. Hey, and this is great. I love candy. Or what a lot of you guys put, fear of consequences. I behave myself because I don't want to get in trouble. That's one of the main ideas with the pre-conventional stage. So acting in your own self-interest, doing it for rewards, what gets you the thing you want. That would be one part of pre-conventional you could talk about. I'm going to take candy because it's delicious. Or pre-conventional, I'm afraid of punishment. I'm afraid if I take more than one piece of candy, my parents will find out and they yell at me. Or the person behind the door will come out and yell at me and I'll get punished, hit on the hand or whatever, spanked for it. I'm afraid of punishment. Okay, so have a great weekend. Let me know if you have any questions or there are any topics on the College Board Review. I put memory up there today, so that's something you can work on over the weekend. There'll be FRQ number 8 for you to work on through Tuesday, and I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.